You helped out many, many people by doing the two-part series, Stephen Fry, The Secret Life of a Manic Depressive.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do it, and was it liberating for you? You won the Emmy, but was it liberating for you personally, etc.? Was it cathartic?
Yes, it was. That wasn't necessarily the reason I did it. It is connected with going back to theatre, which is a roundabout way of answering your question, because 17 years ago, I think it was, I was in a play by Simon Gray called Cellmates. Mm-hmm. And on the Sunday, in the West End, Sunday is a dark day for theatres. Unlike New York, we have this good system of having a matinee on Sundays and dark Mondays. And on the Sunday, some blackness swept over me. I'd been used to it. I had, without knowing it, not until did I make this documentary, that I discovered that, in fact, a doctor when I was 14 years old had suggested that I might be bipolar, which was a very advanced diagnosis for the time. The word was barely used. It was always manic depression. Anyway, I had this terrible blackness sweep over me. It was almost inexplicable. It's a bit like remembering pain, you know? It's a very hard thing to do. You can remember you were in pain, but you can't recall it. You can't make yourself feel that pain again. Thank goodness, or we'd all be in hell all the time. I just got into my car and I drove to Dover and then got a ferry to Zeebrugge and then drove across through Belgium, not really knowing where I was going. I had in my head some strange fantasy that I would go up to North Germany through Schleswig-Holstein into Denmark, and in some northern craggy part of Denmark buy a very thick white jumper and a pipe and write poems and teach English in a small school somewhere where they would never find me, while sort of fishing as a hobby. It's a most peculiar fantasy, frankly unreal. It's like, I imagine Andy Warhol being a farmer in the Midwest. But anyway, I was caught up with by the famed and beloved British media, and many people showed me excessive and extraordinary kindness. Dear friends, total strangers, and others. John Cleese basically just sent me a set of keys and an address, and said, "This house is yours till you want to leave it." It was a beautiful house in Santa Barbara, and I spent 6 months there. As I had nothing else to do, and I couldn't feel that I was able to change my mind necessarily, I knew that at least I could change my body, so I could walk every day, and I could sort of feel slightly fitter, I could swim every day, I could do something about myself. And I did start seeing a therapist as well. It was the West Coast, my mother being Jewish, I just deliberately chose the one that had the Jewish name, because I just thought that would somehow... If it was too waspish a name in California, I thought they'd be rather pretentious, where I thought Jew would be kind of, so why would you think that? You know, I needed the discipline. And eventually I sort of laid the plans of a return home, and managed to get home without too much disaster. There were, sort of headlines and things, and will he ever do this again, will he ever do that? Thank Kay Redfield Jameson leads an extraordinary high-functioned life, but she lives also on the highest dose of lithium that you can be on without destroying your kidneys. She is, I tell you, yeah, you're right. I like this whispering. We're all friends here. She is Professor of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University, which I think most people would recognise as probably the best teaching hospital, not just in America, but probably in the world. She is responsible for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual section on bipolarity, and is the leading expert in the subject, as well as the leading victim of the subject, which is one thing. Not only that, she is a visiting professor in English literature at the University of St Andrews, Britain's third oldest university. So, in many ways, she's an extraordinary example and an inspiration of how you can be a high-functioning person with a very debilitating disease or affliction, whatever you wish to call it, chronic condition. She's written other wonderful books, Touched by Fire, in which she has shown how, and it's a tricky business, and she admits it, it's retrospectively to diagnose, to say Schumann was depressive, manic depressive is clear. You can tell from his letters. It's absolutely apparent. It's not always easy, though. People do the same with those on the Asperger's spectrum. Was Mozart on the Asperger's spectrum? But people argue about this. It's very hard to know. But the point is, it gives an enormous amount of hope to those with the condition. And with these two films, I wanted to make 2 points which seem mutually exclusive. And one is for people to recognise how serious a condition bipolarity is, how, as doctors would call it, morbid. In other words, it can cause a slide in life which can be fatal. Because our moods are very hard things precisely to quantify, but we all know that we can be faintly annoyed one day and quite cheerful the next. But someone who is truly depressed or truly manic, it is a far cry from that. And as it happens, there are obvious things to turn to control your moods. If your mood is very, very high, you would turn to something that brought you down, either cannabis or morphine, in other words, heroin, or alcohol. And if your moods were very, very low, it's quite conceivable that you would turn to cocaine, because these things would just easily control you. And you would therefore be seen as just another degenerate junkie, drug user, that kind of figure. And people have little sympathy sometimes for such figures, and they just snap out of it. And their wives, their girlfriends, their partners, their boyfriends, whoever, leave them, and they run out of money, and they just slide down the social scale. Or they are brave and they go to Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous, and then are left then with the problem of why it was in the first place. They turned to the self-medication of alcohol and drugs. And that's where they face that they have a condition. And I was shocked by how few times doctors, when presented with a patient who says, I'm just so depressed, so miserable, didn't ask the question back, but are there times when sometimes you're quite the opposite? Because it's very, very important if you're going to diagnose someone with bipolar disorder to make sure they're not just a unidepressive. And you say, here's some pills for your depression. That's not much good when you're having a manic episode. And to describe manic episodes, they can be extraordinarily funny sometimes because they're so... they exhibit themselves in sometimes lack of inhibition, sexual inhibition, social inhibition, and so on. Shopping sprees is one of mine, I'm afraid. I have literally come back from central London, put shopping bags in a spare bedroom, and then 3 days later looked at the 17 different full shopping bags, and then just thrown them all away, or give them to a charity shop because I just not wanted to look at them. I didn't know why it was that I was just so absolutely obsessed. That was one man who told me, his wife told me, she said, that he took a huge sheet and he took apart the engine of his car piece by piece and put with a Sharpie, put a little mark around each piece of the car, gave it a number, a place, because he was going to polish it and burnish it and put the engine back together again. And about 2/3 of the way through this project, his mood swung and he just kicked it all to pieces, destroyed the whole motor car. So I wanted to show people that this is a very serious thing, and it particularly affects, obviously, those with the least resources, the most outcast and marginalised in our society, because they are the least likely to be able to have the articulacy and the persistence to tell the doctors that they need more attention and they need more help than being told to just take a pill and walk away or walk it off, But they are true, and Kay Jameson is one example, I'm a lesser one, but there are people, it's about being able to cope, to manage the condition, and I got a terrible fright a year and a half or so ago. I was making another documentary, and this was about homophobia around the world, which is a pretty disturbing subject at the moment. And I was going to countries where some of the homophobia is so horrific, and really is almost not to be believed. And amongst them was Uganda. And one night, I just had one of those really, really black nights, and I was travelling so much across so many time zones, I'd taken at least 3 packs of Ambien with me, and I swallowed just about all of them and half a bottle of vodka. And fortunately, the next morning, I was found on the floor with 4 broken ribs. I must have thrashed around and convulsed and God knows what else. Mm. So that made me think, this is ridiculous. I've been coping on my own, thinking I can. And I've been rejecting medication, because the one thing I live by, really, is my ability to put one word after another in the service of some piece of entertainment or information giving or whatever it might be. And the one thing I didn't want to lose was articulacy, essentially, the nimbleness of mind, sprightliness and wit and all the other things that have been my source of income and my delight. And the idea of being better but zombified, which was to me like the ending of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I just couldn't bear the idea. And I found this magnificent psychiatrist who says, I like to give drugs. He's an Irish figure, and he says, I like to give as few as possible, but you have to start by finding how. So he gave me a feral wedge of these 2. One was a mood controller, one's what's called an SNRI. It's a bit like Prozac, which is an SSRI, but it's just a semi-norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. Try saying that too often. And I was kind of like that, but certainly not feeling miserable. So he said, no, that's not good. So after a week, he halved the dose, and I was kind of like, I feel a bit better, but I tried doing the Sunday Times crossword and I couldn't do it in under 20 minutes. I thought, oh, this is no, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. So he halved it again, and that was great. It was fantastic. Everything back shape. But then I had a black mood, so he just minutely altered it.